Hello Rapid Readers, I'm Lewis and welcome back to another Rapid Review. Have you ever come out of a VR gaming session and just thought, my god, I'm in a lot of pain. My arms are aching, I'm shaking, my head's hurt, everything's a mess. And then you have that moment of thinking, why is this just so awkward? See, now VR shooters are intense, but half the time your setup is fighting you instead of it helping you. And I was struggling with the same fatigue, messy recoil and inconsistent accuracy in games like Resident Evil Village VR, Alien Rogue Incursion and many more. Now, longer gaming sessions, they just became uncomfortable. The immersion just started to break down and the experience for me just did not feel as natural as I wanted it to be. Until I tried this. This is the Armory R1 VR gunstock from VR Tactical Gear, and it completely changed how VR shooters felt for me in general. Now in this video, I'm not going to be doing a quick first impression. No. I wanted to test the Armory R1 through its paces. I went through multiple VR games that I own and tried and checked every single one in detail, where I could see whether it was generally an improvement or it was just an accessory, whether it depended on the game and the optimization of the game's gun mechanics, or whether this just wasn't worth your time. And honestly, you'd be surprised with what I found out. So before we start, I just want to say, grab yourself a snack, get yourself a drink, relax, and please enjoy this video. And for anyone that owns the Armory R1, I have also put up a video to show how to put it together, as that was something I struggled with when it came to the PSVR 2. Thank you. Enjoy the video, guys. Bye. So the setup is straightforward, but I've made this quick guide so you know what to do. So you want to remove the bolt underneath the R1 using the Allen key that is provided, or your very own if you own one. Once you have removed the bolt, insert your chosen attachment. This can be from the MetaQuest 3 to the PSVR 2 to the Pico, and then re-secure using the included Allen key. Now with the PSVR 2 it was a little bit more tricky. You have to clip and twist, and that's why I've made this guide. The MetaQuest 3 was simple, it was just place in, place out, easy. So you want to remove the small bolt that keeps the controller attached, which you can see me do in this video. Once you've done that, slide in the right hand side and then twist up so that it's sort of like you're twisting your hand on the right hand side. And once this is secure, you'll be able to feel. Now to remove it, it's the same way you would hold it and twist left, which will then remove it. But always remember to reattach the small part with the bolt to keep your controller from slipping out or being damaged. Thank you, I hope this helped. So I decided to start my test off with a game that I found absolutely incredible, and I wanted to feel the most realistic experience I could get. So I started with Alien Rogue Incursion, and I'm gonna tell you, walking around in Alien Rogue Incursion with the Armory R1 was surprisingly simple. Movement felt natural, the weight of the stock never got in the way, and I didn't feel restricted just moving through the environment. Now the puzzle sections were a bit of a mixed bag. Most of the time they were fine, but in some moments clearly expected wider hand movement was needed. That's where the gunstock could feel a bit in the way. Not broken, just something you had to adjust to. Then came the combat, and yeah, this is where the game really clicked. The first time I ran into a xenomorph while using the gunstock, it made me jump. Proper heart and mouth moment. Having the stock shouldered made the encounter feel way more intense. My aim stayed steady, recoil was controlled, and instead of panic firing, I actually felt focused. Even while my brain was screaming, run. What really makes this game terrifying though is being stalked. So hearing the xenomorphs moving around, knowing that they're out there somewhere and not being able to see them, that tension hits hard in VR. Now, the gunstock adds to that feeling because you feel like you're holding an actual weapon, like it actually matters. And that's what I was looking for when it came to Alien. Interacting with the environment is mostly fine, but there are moments where the stock can get in the way slightly, opening things or reaching awkward angles. It's manageable, but it does remind you that this game wasn't built specifically around gunstock's use. Once combat fully kicks off again, though, everything falls into place. Full firefights feel incredible, reloading with the R1 felt controlled and deliberate, and staying on target during chaos was much easier than without it. After clearing an area, I found myself instinctively doing what you do in the films, turning on the flashlight, scanning the room, checking corners, no movement, no sound, then you hear something. Nothing shows up, so I open the door. And suddenly, a xenomorph shows up looking for a hug. That moment alone sums up why Alien works so well with the Armory R1. It's intense, immersive, terrifying, and when the game and the hardware line up, it feels incredible. That's where I ended the test. Heart racing, weapon up, and absolutely convinced this setup belongs in this game. Next on my list was one of my all-time favourite franchises, Five Nights at Freddy's. And this was Help Wanted 2. And I started right from the menu and jumped straight into the game. Now, you're probably thinking, really? Yeah, honestly. First thing I did, I went straight for the toy dart gun sitting on the table before doing anything else. I just wanted to test its raw accuracy so I could start shooting at the balloons. And yeah, honestly, very accurate. Instantly felt more controlled than without the R1, which already gave me a good feeling going in. So after that, it was time for the first proper test, Phaser Blast. And honestly, my aim was on point. I'm not saying I didn't miss a few targets, I definitely did. But compared to playing without the Armory R1, the improvement was massive. Less wobble, smoother tracking, and a way more confident when lining up my shots. I completed the round, got the cheer, yay! And picked up the little prize. But of course, this isn't a new game for me, I've already unlocked everything. After that, I went back and tried the small toy ball gun, just to see how that felt. Same result, accurate, easy to control, and surprisingly comfortable with the gun stock. Then purely for a laugh, I grabbed the Phaser Blaster, and because you kind of have to, and just started shooting it around. With all that done, it was time for the real test, Captain Foxy's log ride. And my god, it was incredible. There were no issues at all, smooth aiming, solid tracking, and everything just worked exactly how you'd want it to. Even taking on Moon was easy on the Armory R1. Was easier than I expected, but let's be honest, I know why some of you are here. So yes, I made sure to include the jump scare, and that's where I wrapped up the test for Help Wanted 2. So this was easily the best experience I had with the Armory R1. Gun Club VR feels like this gun stock was made for it. So we jumped straight into shooting some zombies. First weapon up was a PDX AR, and honestly, it was fantastic. Aiming felt flawless, shooting felt controlled, reloading felt natural, even looking down the scope felt spot on. Everything just clicked. This was the moment where I realised, yes, this setup belongs here. Next, I switched things up and tested the M9 handgun, this time without zombies. I wanted to see how it felt with a timed face-off against enemies. And yeah, 4 stars out of 4. Come on. Accuracy was solid. Transitions felt smooth, and using a handgun with the stock actually felt way better than I expected. After that, it was time to bring out the MP582 SMG. And now it was Walker slaying time. At first, I'll be honest, I wasn't great. But as I settled into the rhythm, the headshots started rolling in, one after another. I even unlocked a trophy, which obviously resulted in me shooting into the air like I just won the lottery. Then came the M870 shotgun. And this is where I hit my first real problem. Aiming, fun. Shooting, great. Reloading, yes. That was the issue. I died again, and again, and again, until eventually I figured out the reloading technique, and once I did, I could get through the round. But even then, it still felt awkward. This really showed that shotguns with the R1 on Gun Club VR were not ideal, at least in this setup. Once I realised I could reload using a button on the controller, things improved, but it was still a struggle compared to every other weapon. Next up was the Delisle rifle. At first, not great, unless I aimed it like a shotgun. Once I adjusted my stance and approach, it started to feel a lot more sense. But it definitely took me more getting it used to than the others. Now for the most important test, the AWSM sniper rifle. And honestly, this is exactly what I was looking for. Being able to stay steady, look down the sights properly, and line up shots made it feel incredible. Headshots were clean, controlled, and incredibly satisfying. Just before the end of the test though, I had to try a fan favourite. Straight out of Call of Duty Zombies. Yeah, that's right, the M1911. And wow, using that with the gun stock felt amazing. The number of headshots I was landing was wild, and it felt effortless once I got into the flow. Out of every game I tested so far, This was the best by far. Gun Club VR didn't just support the R1, it rewarded you fully. And this is where I came to the end of my test. So for my next test, I wanted to see if Hitman World of Assassination was possible. I really wanted to figure out the best possible setup to test the gun stock properly, and honestly, I was excited for this one. I started things off by heading into the hotel level. I walked in from the balcony, entered my room, and the first thing I grabbed was a sniper rifle, because my biggest question going in this test was simple. Can a sniper rifle feel more secure with the gun stock? Can it give me a steadier aim and reduce that shaky feeling? There was only one way to find out. I made my way back onto the balcony and started scanning for the perfect target. After a bit of searching, I spotted a small group and thought, bingo, this was the moment. Now, aim in itself wasn't the problem. The issue was finding a comfortable position to actually take the shot. That took a bit of time to figure out, adjusting my stance and lining everything up. Once I finally steadied myself, I lined up the shot and fired. Immediately, all eyes were on me. At that point, I had to act fast and decide what my next move was going to be. But unfortunately, luck wasn't on my side. I was spotted, caught, and taken out. So overall, the sniper test was okay. The added stability helped, but the experience wasn't as smooth as I was hoping. That made me wonder, how would other weapons feel? So next, I jumped into the VR tutorial, where I could experiment a bit more freely. Now, I did pick up the shotgun first to see how it felt with the Armory R1, but I never actually got to use it, and instead moved on to the assault rifle. Firing the rifle definitely felt steadier, but I couldn't find a single shot mode, which made my shooting having to be more improvised. The aim itself was good, the recoil felt more controlled, and shots were more stable than without the gun stock. That said, not fully knowing my way around the Hitman's VR's mechanics definitely worked against me here. Because of that, the test didn't go as smoothly as I'd planned. Still, one thing was clear. Aiming was improved. Steadier hands, less shake, and better control overall, even if the game itself made things harder than they needed to be. So while Hitman was more of a mixed experience, it showed flashes of potential, but also highlighted just how important proper VR weapon design and alignment is when it comes to gun stock report. Now, this one was huge for me, and I needed this one to pass every single stop. Resident Evil Village VR was one of the main reasons I needed to test this gun stock. I wanted the most realistic experience possible. Something that actually felt like a survival horror and not just pointlessly pointing controllers all around. So I started where it made the most sense, the shooting range. First weapon I picked up was the F2 rifle. I picked it up, walked over to the line, aimed, and took my first shot. And honestly, that was crazy. I was hitting every single shot, moving targets, headshots, the lot. At that moment, it generally felt like I was holding an actual rifle. Not a controller, not a VR gimmick, a rifle. This passed my test. So I tossed it aside and moved straight onto the M1897 shotgun. Back to the targets, fired, cocked it back, fired again. Every target hit. Smooth, controlled, and incredibly satisfying. Once again, another pass. Next up was the most important weapon of all, the Lemmy handgun. This is the gun you're going to be using most of the time in Village, so I had to make sure it felt right. So I headed back to the range, aimed, and fired. Now I'll be honest, I did miss a few shots, but the improvement was obvious straight away. The aim was steadier, was more controlled, and it was way more consistent than before. Now don't get me wrong, my aim wasn't bad to begin with, but this just felt so different. It felt like I was actually holding a gun, and that's exactly what I was looking for with this gun stock. So after all of that, I thought it was only best to test the Samurai Edge AW Model 01. This one's a bit easier due to the fact that it comes with a laser. But even so, it was faster, steadier, and more responsive with the gun stock. Last handgun to test was a personal favourite of mine, and probably most people, the M1911. I lined it up, aimed, fired. Test completed. That was it. I knew I had one more question to ask. How does it feel in the actual game? So I jumped back into Village, and honestly, it was fine. Movement was easy. Honestly, it felt just as good with the gun stock as it did without it. I tested running, shooting, reloading, everything. No issues, no awkward moments, no fighting the stock. It passed my test completely. And not only that, but it was also better than I was expecting. So if you were looking for something more realistic, immersive, and pure shooting feel, Resident Evil Village in VR with the Armory R1 just worked perfectly. This was one of those games that I had to test. Star Wars Tales of the Galaxy was not something that I was sure would work because I genuinely wanted to know whether playing with the gunstock or without it was better. So, in a galaxy far, far away, Lewis was in space using a gunstock. Sounds interesting, right? Well, straight away, movement and interacting with the environment felt fine. Completing puzzles was simple, nothing felt awkward, and the gunstock never became a hassle. But the real question was obvious. Can I actually shoot properly with it? It didn't take long to find out. Pirates attacked the ship. I opened the panel, grabbed my blaster, and then the blast doors broke open. This was my moment. Weapon training kicked in, and the armory R1 did not disappoint. It was proof I was not a stormtrooper. Aiming felt steady, shots landed exactly where I wanted them to, and the firefights felt far more controlled than without the gunstock. But that was just with the standard blaster. So I took it further. I picked up a blaster rifle from the enemy to see how those played out. And this is where the gunstock really started to shine. After the pirates killed my droid, yeah, it was personal. It was time for revenge, and I meant business. Firing felt perfect. Targets dropped easily, more pirates started pouring in, coming out of the vents, dropping in from above. It was time to clean up this mess. I even tested dual hand weapon setups, and it became very clear which one had more stability. The right hand attached to the gunstock was noticeably steadier than the left. After clearing the area, I fought my way through even more pirates trying to escape. And honestly, what a rush. I reached my destination, launched myself into a escape pod, and got out just in time. And when I finally met the pirate leader, I fired my weapon at the door and waved goodbye. That entire sequence proved it to me. The Armory R1 works brilliantly in Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge. It made combat more immersive, more controlled, and way more exciting. And it left me generally excited to see what other games it could elevate. My final test was about one thing. How does the Armory R1 feel on a roller coaster? And honestly, Switchback VR was the perfect place to test this theory. It was fast, it's chaotic, and with a nice dose of horror thrown in. Now, because this game uses two handguns, I'll admit I was a bit skeptical. I wasn't sure how this was going to play out, but I needed to test everything I could possible. So, going into the belly of the beast, I knew I had to be ready. Once the ride kicked off, I was handed my two handguns, and it was game on. And straight away, I was shocked. Using the gunstock in my right hand, my accuracy was insane. Now you gotta remember, you have no, and I mean no, reticle. So you don't know where you're shooting, it's all blind fire. And I missed maybe one shot of 7, which on a moving roller coaster in VR is seriously impressive. Then I tested the same sections without the gunstock. This time, I missed around 2 shots out of 7. Not terrible, but the difference was clear. As the coaster kept moving, the test really came down to preference. Shooting from a distance, I was hitting targets quickly and efficiently with the gunstock. Clean shots, steady aim, no panic firing. That said, I won't lie, this would have been absolutely heaven with 2 gunstocks. And no, this isn't me asking to do a test on all of the games with 2 handguns. But using the Armory R1 here generally reminded me of those theme park rides like Disneyland shooters or old school arcade machines where zombies rush in and you've got to fight them off with the mounted weapon. For experiences like that, this setup would be perfect, especially in games that focus on one primary weapon, like an AR. Still, the test was passed. Switchback VR proved that even in a fast-moving, chaotic, horror-filled ride, the Armory R1 adds stability, confidence, and better accuracy. And that officially wrapped up every game test for my review of the R1. After running the R1 through a full spread of VR games, this ended up feeling less like a quick accessory test and more like a proper long-form review. I tested it across all the games I owned: Alien Rogue Incursion, Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2, Gun Club VR, Hitman Mode of Assassination, Resident Evil Village, Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, and Switchback VR. What stood out very quickly is that when a game is well optimized for VR gunplay, the R1 works with it almost effortlessly. Aiming feels steadier, shots feel more deliberate, and the overall experience becomes more grounded and immersive. When things feel off, it is rarely the gunstock itself. More often it comes down to how the game handles weapon alignment, reload mechanics, or two-handed interactions. Some games work with the gunstock naturally, while others feel like that you are fighting it until you adapt. Once you understand how that specific game wants you to interact, the R1 usually starts working with you rather than against you. In games like Gun Club VR and Resident Evil Village, the R1 feels almost purpose-built. In slower, more tactical moments such as Hitman, the added stability makes a noticeable difference. Even in faster, more chaotic experiences like Switchback VR and Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2, it still improved consistency, especially under pressure. This is not an accessory that plays the games for you. It does not remove learning curves, and it does not override poor game design. What it does is provide a more stable and realistic foundation for shooting, which lets well-designed VR systems shine. Overall, the R1 feels less like an optional extra and more like a tool. If a game is built well, it elevates that experience. If a game is not, it exposes where the limitations really are. So if you care about VR shooters and you're looking for a more realistic and immersive experience, this is absolutely something worth considering. If you enjoyed this review, please feel free to hit subscribe. We would really appreciate it. I'll be covering more games and more hardware tested properly and shown as they are actually played. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out VR Tactical Gear to get your very own Armory R1 gun stock today. Thank you to Brett and the team at VR Tactical Gear for providing the R1 for this review, and as always, thank you for watching. Comment down below the game you felt was the best from this test. I will see you again soon with another rapid review video. Bye guys.